talking about chapter 8 of the Abba Formation, Impacts of Sonship on Prayer. And what you're going to find in this chapter is that there is a drastic difference between sonship prayer and orphan prayer. Of course, if you've had Abba Factor, then all that begins to come back to your mind. And first thing I want to say is anytime we talk about prayer, a lot of us begin to shut down because we've not had experiences in prayer, some that had any life to it or any revelation to it. And prayer was just a duty. Prayer was something that we had to do to try to be a good Christian. But what we want you to see in this chapter is that prayer takes on a whole new dynamic when you understand, number one, that you're in partnership with God by the Holy Spirit living in you that brings you into the conversation of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And how could any conversation with God not be dynamic and exciting? So prayer is an incredible frontier of discovery when you get into the Father's heart and realize the Holy Spirit in you is going to show you things you've never seen before in this place of prayer. The other thing that I want to just prepare you for is in this chapter, you're going to find a chart, and it's very unique. You won't find it anywhere else. But in this chapter, you're going to see the chart that contrasts orphan thinking about prayer to sonship thinking about prayer. And page 149, possibly, at least in the English translation. And this is one that I want you to take a little bit of time with, because what it will do is really help you see and draw the contrast. How have I been thinking about prayer? Have I had thoughts or ideas about prayer that were just kind of, I'm trying to twist God's arm, or I've got to make something happen, or I've got to be a good Christian, and so I've got to clock in my time? Or am I really delighting to be with the Father? So I'm really excited to get you into chapter 8, because this is powerful and it's part of my life, and I hope it becomes part of yours.
So you are pretty passionate about prayer, but not every believer is. So can you share some from your experience, some reasons why people may not be excited about prayer, and how this chapter might bring a newfound encouragement or enthusiasm for prayer?
Well, and we talk about it some in the chapter, but quite frankly, many of us don't get excited about prayer because we've tried that and it didn't seem to work. I asked God for something and I didn't get it. You get a little disappointed. We don't realize that we may be asking questions that He's not wanting to answer when we're asking about the whats and the wheres and the whens. When am I going to get the new job? When am I going to find this person? And God's wanting to talk to us about who we are and who He is. So there are many reasons why you may have had some bad experiences or no experiences in prayer. You may have been exposed to what I heard one pastor call rhetorical prayer. Rhetorical prayer is when it sounds good, but you're really not expecting anything to happen. And when we talk to God, He is inviting us to come in and experience Him, and then to see Him work in response to our prayer. I'm just thinking of Psalm 18 when David is praying, and it's kind of a woe is me. Look at all the trouble that I'm in. And he cries out to God, and God comes with breath out of His nostrils and fire in His eyes, and He's coming in the clouds, and He's going to do something about this. I think if we ever saw how much our Father wants to come and break in to the details of our lives through conversation, we would get very passionate about it too.
So clearly you're drawing a contrast. I think a lot of people think of prayer in terms of bringing your list of petitions to God and missing the invitation of a loving Father to have conversation with Him. And that's part of the impact of sonship on prayer, is to see that the Father is inviting us into conversation. So in this chapter, you also address a little bit about Paul's prayers, the Apostle Paul. So tell us just a little bit, just whet our appetite about what we can learn from Paul's
prayers. I can't tell you just a little bit, but I will try. You can find in all of Paul's letters, with the exception of the Galatian letter, because he was a little ticked off at them, but in all of his letters, he starts with a prayer. And the powerful thing about Paul's prayers is his relationship with the Lord by the Holy Spirit. He had this deep understanding. This is where we get most of our understanding about the Abba Formation. That comes out of 1 Corinthians chapter 2, which Paul wrote to the Corinthian church. Romans chapter 8, praying in the Spirit, comes out of Paul's letters. And so Paul had this understanding of hearing the Father speak on the inside of him by the Holy Spirit and being able to pour his heart out to God. And so you get this first-hand glimpse of that every time you open up one of Paul's letters, whether it's the Ephesian letter, the Colossian letter, the Philippian letter. Every one of those starts. Now, in the Ephesian letter, you get one in both chapter 1 and chapter 3. Right in the middle, he breaks out in prayer again. He gets so excited. So I would just encourage you, if you've never had an incredible, deep, powerful experience in prayer, go to Paul's letters, Ephesians chapter 1, chapter 3, Colossians chapter 1, Philippians chapter 1, 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. Go to any of those letters and just read where Paul begins to pray for them. And you'll see such revelation and such relationship and such a download. Paul's praying for all the churches, for example. I pray, Ephesians 1, verse 17, that the Lord would give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of Him, that you would know Him better, and then that you would know yourself, that you are the hope of His calling, the riches of the glorious inheritance that you are in Him as saints, and the exceeding greatness of His power that's at work in you because you believe. And then he begins to go ahead and tell about how that power raised Jesus from the dead in a whole new creation. When you begin to just read that as a prayer, read it out loud. I do this all the time. I've got to memorize pretty much by now, but this morning I'm praying, Lord, grant a spirit of wisdom and revelation. And what happens? Oh, the Holy Spirit begins to just fill you. You don't always know it at the moment, but somewhere, sometime, when you're not aware of it here, He's doing stuff here. It's so good.
I love that. Clearly, you write this chapter from the experience of one who prays as a son, who has experienced the transformation of the impacts of sonship on prayer. So let's enjoy chapter 8, see what the Holy Spirit has prepared for you in that.